If you've spent any time on social media lately, you've probably seen lists like this: foods a cancer survivor will never eat again, or ingredients that a nutritionist says to throw away immediately, or maybe everyday staples recast as hidden dangers. Well, today I'm answering questions from listeners wondering how worried they should actually be about these kinds of things. And also, I'll be sharing some exciting news about some upcoming live shows that we're going to be taping, maybe in your area. So be sure to stick around till the end to hear more. Hello, I'm Monica Reinagel, and you're listening to the Nutrition Diva podcast, a show where we take a closer look at the latest nutrition news, trends, and research, and answer your food and nutrition questions. Today, I'm actually tackling a trio of questions that circle around a common theme. I got emails about three very different foods: microwave popcorn, chewing gum, and oatmeal. But in each case, the question underneath the question was the same, and that was, how worried should I be? My short answer is a little, maybe, depending on the specifics. My longer answer is what the rest of this episode is for. Because in all three cases, the core concern is real, but the real world implications are generally not as dire as they're sometimes made out to be. And I think once you understand what's actually going on, you're going to feel a lot better. Let's start with the popcorn. Giselle wrote in to say she occasionally buys microwave popcorn, and she's heard rumors that it may not be so good for us. But then her daughter saw a video online of a cancer survivor listing the 10 foods she will no longer eat, and microwave popcorn was one of them. So Giselle's wondering, is there any science on this question? Now, hearing from cancer survivors about their experience, that carries a lot of emotional weight. But most cancer survivors are not scientists or experts, and they are just as susceptible to false or inflated claims as anyone else. Maybe even more susceptible. I mean, the stakes are high, right? And there's not a lot they wouldn't do in order to get and stay healthy. But that urgency sometimes leads to some false assumptions or conclusions. Now, in this case, there are two distinct concerns regarding microwave popcorn. The first is a chemical called diacetyl. This is a butter flavoring compound, and it made headlines years ago when factory workers at microwave popcorn plants developed a serious and irreversible lung disease. And that story was real and tragic. But that was a story about occupational exposure. It's not something that would affect consumers. So these workers were inhaling concentrated diacetyl vapors 8 hours a day or more. The amounts that you might be exposed to at home when you open a bag of microwave popcorn, that's a different order of magnitude entirely. But more to the point, most major brands reformulated and removed diacetyl more than a decade ago anyway. The second concern here is more current and more legitimate: PFAS. These are the so called forever chemicals that were commonly used to line microwave popcorn bags in order to make them grease proof and heat proof. The problem, of course, is that PFAS are extremely persistent, both in the environment and in the human body, and they have been linked to a range of health concerns, including some cancers. In February 2024, the FDA announced that the voluntary industry phase out of PFAS in all of food packaging was complete. But independent testing published in April 2026, more than 2 years later, still found PFAS in all 29 products that they tested across four major US brands. So either the phase out wasn't as complete as they thought, maybe older products are still making their way through the supply chain, or there's another source of PFAS contamination somewhere else in the supply chain. Either way, it's not fully resolved. Now, a few brands have explicitly committed to PFAS free bags: Skinny Pop, Newman's Own, and Black Jewel are among those with good reputations on this front. But look, you can also pop popcorn in your microwave without any added chemicals or packaging. For years, I was making microwave popcorn using plain brown paper lunch bags. You just dump in 3 tablespoons or so of unpopped kernels, fold the top down a couple of times, and microwave it for about 3 minutes or until the popping slows down. And then you can drizzle that with butter or olive oil, a little salt, whatever you want. More recently, though, I discovered an even more renewable option. It's a glass pitcher that's made specifically to pop popcorn in the microwave. Let's just say I didn't have to work very hard to figure out where to store this thing because it's basically always in use. So, to answer Giselle's question, yes, there is a real basis for some concern about microwave popcorn, specifically the packaging, not the food itself. But you can minimize this concern simply by being a little bit more selective about what brand you buy or by popping your own. So, pop on. Our next question has to do with microplastics in chewing gum. Larry wrote in after seeing coverage of a study published earlier this year finding that chewing gum releases microplastic particles into your saliva. And Larry wants to know, does this outweigh whatever benefits we might get from chewing sugarless gum? All right, first let's look at the study. Researchers from UCLA found that a single piece of gum releases somewhere between 100 and 600 microplastic particles into your saliva, and almost all of that happens in the first few minutes of chewing. And interestingly, they found that the so called natural gum bases released about the same number of particles as the synthetic ones. Now, first, I need to clarify that microplastics are not the same thing as PFAS. And I think a lot of people confuse the two. PFAS are synthetic chemical compounds that are biologically active. They interact with our tissues, they have known health effects. Microplastics, on the other hand, are physical particles. Whether they cause harm in the human body or whether there's a safe level of exposure is still an open question. The thing is that at this point, microplastics are present essentially everywhere. They are in drinking water, in seafood, in the air, in table salt. It would be virtually impossible to completely avoid them. But if reducing your microplastic exposure is a priority for you, you know what? Chewing gum is probably not where I'd start. A takeout cup of coffee may release tens of thousands of microplastic particles into a hot drink. Storing hot foods in plastic containers is another significant source. Those may be much larger contributors to your daily load than your chewing gum. And meanwhile, as Larry implies, chewing sugarless gum delivers some legitimate benefits. Chewing a piece of gum can increase your focus or your concentration when you're performing a cognitively challenging task, for example. And many people find that chewing a piece of gum helps them reduce snacking. It can also reduce the risk of gum disease and tooth decay. It may even have gut health benefits by supporting beneficial gut bacteria. And you can hear more about that in episode number 480. As to whether those benefits outweigh the potential risks, that's a question I'll have to leave up to you. Personally, I still feel perfectly comfortable with chewing a piece of sugarless gum a few times a week. If, on the other hand, you're chomping through a pack a day and you're really worried about microplastics, well, this might be a reason to adjust your habits. Our final question comes from Celia, who is concerned about possible mold contamination in her morning oatmeal. Celia has a somewhat novel method of preparing her morning oatmeal. Because she prefers a nubbier texture than you would get from regular porridge style oatmeal, she starts with extra thick organic rolled oats and she simply pours some boiling water over them. But, she writes, I recently read that all oats should be assumed to contain mold and that cooking them for at least 10 minutes will kill any contamination. Now, oats are actually one of the more mycotoxin-prone grains. Mycotoxins are toxic compounds produced by certain molds, and the presence of these compounds in foods does pose a real concern. And I talked about this in episode number 856. So, studies consistently find detectable levels of mycotoxins in a meaningful percentage of oat samples worldwide. That's probably the kernel of truth that Celia's concern is based on. Now, the idea that cooking those oats for 10 minutes would neutralize any contamination, that is actually incorrect. Mycotoxins are heat stable. Boiling water does not destroy them, neither does soaking them overnight. If those toxins are present, they will survive the cooking. So at least this saves Celia from having to endure the squishy consistency of cooked oats. But does it mean that she'd be better off giving up her morning oats entirely? Not necessarily. One of the first steps in processing oats for human consumption is to remove the outer hull of the oat kernel. And fortunately, mycotoxins concentrate heavily in that hull. So research shows that dehulling alone reduces mycotoxin content by 90 to 98%. So by the time rolled or steel cut oats have reached your pantry, the vast majority of any contamination has already been removed. What's more, the FDA routinely samples finished oat products for mycotoxins as part of its ongoing monitoring program. And manufacturers also use practice that minimize the risk of mold formation, such as controlling moisture levels in their storage facilities and also during processing. So, no, Celia doesn't need to change her preparation method. Pouring boiling water over her oats is a perfectly reasonable way to make oatmeal. The oats are unlikely to contain meaningful levels of mycotoxins in the first place. And even if they did, cooking them into gruel wouldn't help. That's our mailbag today. In each case, the core concerns were legitimate, but the real world impacts were generally less dire than we've been led to believe. And that's why we try to look beyond the headlines. So thanks to the listeners who wrote in with those questions. If you have a food or nutrition question you'd like me to answer on an upcoming episode, you can email it to nutrition@quickanddirtytips.com. I also wanted to let my listeners who are in the New York City area or the Washington, D.C. metro area that we are going to be taping some live shows in your area, and I would love it if you could come. It would be great to meet you in person. Now, I'm afraid we don't quite have the final details yet to share, but we are looking to be in Washington, D.C. sometime in August, and then up in New York City in September. I promise I will share more details when I have them, but I just wanted to put that on your radar screen. Nutrition Diva is a Quick and Dirty Tips podcast. Holly Hutchings is our director of podcasts. Steve Riekeberg is our audio engineer. Morgan Christensen heads up podcast operations and advertising. Rebecca Sebastian is our manager of marketing and publicity. Nat Hoops is our marketing and operations assistant. And Maram El-Naguib is our podcast associate. Thanks as always to all of them, but most of all, thanks to you for listening.